Hi everyone, and welcome to week 5. I want to apologize. I never did get a video up last week. A few of you had inquired. My mom's doing much better. She's home from the hospital, and hopefully everything's back to normal. And this week, we're going to be talking about how organizations and individuals communicate ethically during a crisis situation. So it's always important to act ethically. And then a crisis comes along, and in some ways, it's even more important to communicate ethically and to do the right thing because it is a crisis. But at the same time, the stakes are so much higher, and oftentimes people are rushed, so it becomes more difficult. So what I kind of want to talk about today is why is it maybe that ethics during a crisis is more difficult. And we're going to look at a case study, an example, or actually very current recent example. So some of the things that you have to think about during crisis is, again, this issue of honesty. We always want to be honest, but think of how many times during a crisis there has been a temptation where people have tried to hide the facts from the public to minimize fear. Obviously, concerns about the bottom line. So, for example, I was reading up a little bit about Chipotle, and they've been having a lot of issues with norovirus and E. coli. And obviously they want to keep the consumers safe, but in the end, their end goal is to keep consumers coming to the restaurant so that they're continuing to make a profit. What are the long-term implications of the impacts of the crisis as well as the crisis response? So the classic case example that people always look at is when Tylenol, when tampering had led to some of their pills being poisoned. And they just really had this very upfront, honest approach. They recalled, all of the medications off the shelves. They had a plan, and really people stayed loyal to them, and it didn't harm them. And then the other thing, and this is even, I think, in today's world even more important, is the speed with which information is going out there. So another thing that's happening during a crisis is maybe you don't know all the facts, but the public is really hungry for those facts, and the news media. So an example, just the other day, unfortunately, there was a mass shooting in, I believe it was Germany, and now I'm embarrassed that I don't know that, but where the young teenage boy went into a mall. Yes, I think it was Munich, and shot up all these things. And right away, everyone was very quick to assume that it was ISIS related, that it was a white supremacist. And the reality is, after 24 hours and so an investigation, that didn't happen. But you have to wonder if that message was already put out there that this was ISIS or racist related. If people are hearing that message, that has an impact, and maybe people didn't tune in the next day to learn. So those are just some things to consider. So from a kind of corporate standpoint, we're actually going to look at the company IKEA. Many of you are probably familiar. They're a Swedish company that is known for making furniture, organization that you kind of assemble your own. It's lower cost, it's effective. Some of you may have heard that you'll see here, these are their MALM dressers. There was an issue that these are prone to tipping off of the wall if they get off balance. And because of that, several children had been injured, and initially 2 children were actually killed when the 4-dresser drawer fell over. So IKEA was faced with a situation where their product was charged with actually leading to death. So what was their response? Before that, just to talk about this issue of furniture tipping is actually a pretty big issue. As you can see, 1 child dies every 2 weeks when TV, furniture, appliance fall on him or her. My only personal experience of this, when I was younger, my youngest brother, when he was 4, pulled our TV on top of himself. And that was back, when the TVs were big and heavy and not flat. And he actually broke both of his legs when he did that. So you'll see what this happens. There's all of these injuries, and there's been this real movement. It's called Anchor It and Protect a Child. So the idea is, if you have a television or a dresser that's prone to tripping, or any furniture, if you anchor it to the wall, it will be held. So IKEA, their first thing when this happened is they issued what they called a recall, but actually it was customers were encouraged to request a free wall anchoring kit. And basically this kit, you actually put some straps onto the back of the dresser, so if it would tip, the straps would hold it. So consumers had to go online, request this kit. Now, one of the things, there was a couple of issues that people had with this. One is it was on the consumer to be proactive to do it. Two, many people, it turns out, who were purchasing IKEA furniture, which is kind of a lower cost, economical, space-saving version, lived in rental homes, and they did not want to put holes in the walls because then they would later be charged. So there are kind of all these issues. As you can see, there's been really, actually, they sparked a movement. This Anchor It, this is a ad, get on top of it before they do, encouraging all people to do that. However, after this recall, another child was killed because of all of these dressers that have been sold. Only a small fraction of people took the action to get that. And so some people question, did they do enough? Right? Did they really take on the responsibility? So just recently, I believe this is dated June 27th, IKEA has decided to stop selling the dresser. So all of those ones I showed on this first screen are no longer being sold. I guess there is a two drawer version that is still being sold because it passes the safety standards of tipping. So again, and this hasn't made huge, I mean, it's been in the news and people have talked about it. I've seen it, shared on Facebook. Several of my friends, it seems like this is a popular dresser to put in nursery, baby's nursery or a child's room. But the idea is the way that they responded to and communicated about that, there's just the issue of what does that say to the public? But then again, what was their ethical obligation? And so some people say, should they have been more active as soon as the first deaths occurred? Was it really enough just to offer these kits? Knowing then that people, once they could track how many people were getting those, should they have gone further? And so it took another accidental death for them to take that step to actually get rid of and no longer sell those, which again then had impacts on IKEA and their business and their bottom line. So this is just an example to look at and not actually saying either way, did they do a good job handling it? Did they did a bad job? Did they do the ethical thing? Did they do unethical? But just to kind of give you an example of what's happening. And again, when you're in kind of that crisis mode, how do you respond? So this week, you're going to be kind of thinking about that crisis again. Your final project, the milestone for this week is to gather some initial artifacts that you're going to use as you analyze that situation. And again, using kind of today as a model, think about what was the response, and perhaps the response changed over time. So IKEA initially did this, then there was more action, there's that. So really think about that as you're thinking about your crisis. Were there multiple responses along the way? So I hope you all have a great week. I look forward to seeing you on the discussion board, and I actually also look forward to grading your assignment from last week. Thanks.